I hear this voice, same one I've been talking to since I was a kid, ask me by name. My given name's Bruce. It says, Bruce, are you willing to die for what you believe in? And instantly there was a guitar. I mean, talk about timing being impeccable. The guitar riff that Neil Sean does sounds like a rocket ship taking off. And
Mm.
then I get a tug from my solar plexus and I pop out of body. And I turn to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed, turn back to look where I'm going. And before I can get turned around, I'm engulfed by white light.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Zen Benefiel with us. We've been talking briefly a little bit. He's somebody who's got a podcast called One World in a New World. He's also wrote 40 plus books. He runs the Planetary Citizens.net community. I'll ask him more about that in a little bit, but we're going to talk today about his spiritual awakening he had, and that he's also shared this with the International Association of Near-Death Studies, which of course I've said before is really near and dear to my heart with the work that they do. So I was happy to have him on. Thank you so much, Zen, for being on the Soul Inspired.
Oh, my pleasure, Joe. It's wonderful to be here, and what a great reference from Lonnie to do so.
Yeah, no, and Lonnie was amazing too, just having her on. She's like we said, she has a very light energy and just a bright person overall.
Yeah,
I got a little info as we were talking just a moment ago. That's why I started recording right away. I'm like, oh no, it's too much good stuff here because I want to find out how all this happened. So before we go into how the part that you explained occurred with the awakening, I want to go back to your childhood first,
sure.
just to get a little bit about you as a little guy, and just I want to know what kind of influences were in your life? That's the biggest thing I try to focus on, spiritual, religious, like what was your life like as a child? Just a little overview of that.
Oh, it was wonderful. Um, Although it might not have been. I started off as an orphan,
Okay.
and I was adopted at 6 weeks on my parents' wedding anniversary. Well timed for them. So, as I got older, I could remember that date at least. And it was, full of unconditional love. Dad was, I'm not sure if he'd acquired it yet or not, but he was on his way to becoming a 32nd degree Knights Templar in the Masonic Order. He was a tool and die maker for General Motors, so he made the plastic injection molds for the X cars headlamp and taillight assembly. So he had to hold millions of an inch tolerances on the molds to get the reflection that's necessary in those lenses, right?
Okay.
He used to say, anybody can give you a shot, but I can make the needle,
Yeah.
right? And tremendous Piscean, just really fastidious about order, detail, structure, that kind of stuff. Mom was a she taught English and literature at the junior high, eighth grade,
Cool.
and so she inspired the writing side for me. She hoped to get a math or a preacher or a teacher someday. She got both in spades,
Mm.
and and then some.
Right.
And so anyway, my younger years were just full of joy, exploration. My parents encouraged me to learn and grow and experiment, make mistakes, fail forward, that kind of stuff. And at 4.5, my adoptive sister comes home. No blood rate, right? This is newbie from someplace else. And they decide that it's time to tell me about adoption
Mm.
because here, they tell me she's going to come, they bring her home. There's no segue, no pregnant mom, right? She just, boom, shows up. I've got a picture of me holding her and giving her a kiss. It's pretty sweet still. Um,
Nice.
and then, so from that conversation, I had no questions about the unconditional love that they offered me and gave me. Uh, I was really safe, secure. Had a little question about, well, why and who my bio parents might be. But that was fleeting. The residing question, because I'd been going to Sunday school already, they were involved with the United Methodist Church. And So I had this, childlike, innocent, naive question. If I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them?
Mm,
Now,
right.
4.5, but that's just an
Wow.
abnormal question, right? So 3 weeks, maybe a month later, I'm standing on the stairwell. We had a two-story pseudo apartment house, and I was had my elbows in the windowsill and chin on my hand, looking out over the front porch. It was after dark. Porch light was on, and mom's watching TV. I can hear it in the background. She's at the bottom of the stairs. And all of a sudden, I hear this deep male voice just booming. It permeated my entire being. But the only thing it said was, "Hey, you."
Mm,
And I knew I heard it instantly. Instead of engaging it, I spun around to check in with mom to see if she heard it.
right.
And it was different than what the TV voices were, right? And she says, "What voice? What voice?" And you can imagine a 4.5-year-old trying to deepen his voice. Say, "That voice, Mom." I said, "Hey, you." She goes, "No, I didn't hear it. It must have been a peeping Tom." So that was the beginning of having to question the reality of others in comparison to my own. Because
Hmm.
the only thing that we can judge reality is our own experience, right?
Right.
And so fortunately, Dad worked nights. Mom would be in the kitchen. I would stand in front of the living room window at night for a while, and I would project that same voice out. Lights on, can't see out because of the reflection on the window. And I would stand there and I'd wait. Well, 4.5 years old, kid's mind, they say 70,000 thoughts a day. You can't shut up, right? It's constantly going. Well,
Right.
there was a moment where I did. And as soon as I found that place of silence, and I just stumbled on it, I guess, that I heard the voice. It returned. And so I began developing a conversation with it. It's still there today. Then the rest of my childhood, though, it was amazing. I was gifted athlete, academic, um, social skills. I could go anywhere, talk to anybody, do anything. Kind of fortunate kid that everybody didn't like,
Mm,
right? Because of that. Everybody had to work on stuff, and things seemed to come easy to me.
right.
And I found out in my 30s. I was talking to my parents one day, and they were still a little upset because I hadn't gotten to where they thought I could be professionally and income wise. And I get that. However, those things just didn't really matter at the time. But they said, my dad said, "Damn it, we didn't tell you that your IQ was so high. You were off the scale. We didn't know what to do. So we didn't tell you because we were afraid it was going to go to your head and you get full of yourself. So
Hmm.
we just kept it quiet." And I said, "Well, if you'd have told me, maybe I'd have, worked a little harder
Right.
and,
Right.
not screwed up. So, or I was pretty mischievous as well,
Right.
So I got in trouble a lot and it affected my grades because citizenship and academics were combined into grades. I
Hmm.
still graduated 10th of my class at a 300, could have made it salutatorian, didn't want valedictorian. That was a bit too dry. We had
Yeah.
a, his name
Right.
was Dennis Straczynski, and man, he was, one of these classic pocket protector guys.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Didn't want to go there.
No.
But I had fun, and I ran a 4.3 40 and played football, basketball, ran track, played golf, was medalist for a high school team my senior year. Just really had a great life. Small town,
Hmm.
best friends with the chief of police's sons. So that kept me out of trouble too.
Right. In case you needed a what's that? Get out of jail card.
Yeah.
Right.
Never
Right.
visited. And there were a few times I got pulled over at, I was getting served at 17 because I had a full beard. And, guys in the bottle shop didn't know any better. And the times were a little freer, I suppose.
Mhm.
And so there were a few times cops pulled me over after midnight and they'd take whoever was with me and take them home and send me home
Mm,
rather than take me in.
right.
I never really understood how protected I was as a kid until later in life.
Yeah. But it sounds like you had a like a, you had a good time as a child. It wasn't too,
Absolutely did.
yeah, it wasn't there wasn't anything that kind of stuck out that seemed, to put you into a place. And again, we'll get talking about, what
Well, I
starts
did
to happen.
have some, the inner experiences were bereft of conversation with my parents.
Hmm.
Um, I started having out of body experiences when I was 7. I had these phenomenal experiences from the time I was 8 to 10, probably twice a month, where I would observe myself from the corner of my bedroom.
Mm.
And I'd get out of bed, I'd climb out my bedroom window, walk across the neighbor's backyard, climb a fence that surrounded a 10-acre pasture, cow pasture. And as I was walking out into the field, I'd rise up into the air. And first time I looked up, there was this orange cigar-shaped cloud that had to have been a mile long that was above me. And I would rise into that, my observer and the participant, right? I would float up in the air, and then as I would go into the cloud, things would disappear. I'd wake up in bed the next morning.
Wow.
Couldn't wait to go back was the feeling I had.
Hmm.
Right? Sometimes I'd wake up with a nosebleed, and then it wasn't until got ready to move to Phoenix that I was walking through a metaphysical bookstore, and a book falls off the shelf, nobody around. I walk over, and it's Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us. This was in 1981. I think it was published in 78. And I turn it over, it opened up on the floor, right? First paragraph that I read, paraphrase, went something like the most common UFO contactee experience in the Midwest in the late 50s and early 60s was you got it, orange cigar-shaped cloud.
Wow.
I hadn't even thought about that possibility.
Wow.
So that
And
was
you
an
were
early introduction that I had to a world that I would eventually become more um, aware of and interactive with.
you said you were 7 at that time when that happened?
Yeah, when I had my first out of body experience, and then at 8, I started having the cloud experiences.
Mm. Wow. So okay, so this is before, I mean, long before this kind of awakening you have
Yeah,
later on. So you
yeah.
were
So I was kind of
already.
well prepared.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, yeah, so that's interesting. So it wasn't, you weren't the type of child that was going into church every Sunday and all these things and anything like that.
Well, yeah, uh,
Okay.
I did. My parents were pretty involved. Mom sang in the choir. Dad did occasionally too. My aunt was the organist. And we had a big pipe organ, and she's got the three-tiered keyboard. I was just always fascinated at how people can play that, right? And then I
Hmm.
married a piano pedagogue from St. Petersburg, Russia, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
so kind
Wow.
of it came full circle. Um, yeah, it was, I wasn't real religious. I remember one time we walked into the back of the sanctuary, and in my head, blurted out, and I know I didn't speak. I blurted out, "Hey, everybody!" Right? 5, 6 years old, just excited kid, maybe even younger. And heads turned to look at me. And it wasn't just one or two. There was like, almost a dozen.
Hmm.
And it was kind of freaky.
Mm,
And for an instant, but I didn't think anything about it, right? At that time. I mean, kid that young, what are you going to do? You can't extrapolate on all kinds of stuff at that point, right? You don't
right.
have the
Yeah,
life experience or the knowledge to do so.
right. So let's move into, so I get a little background on you. When we first started talking, just briefly, you were mentioning that I think you were in college,
Hmm.
and maybe we'll go back to let us know kind of how this started to happen and kind of the same way you did when we first started speaking.
Sure. Well, I'll extrapolate a little bit. My uncle my mom's brother, was our general practitioner. He was our town doctor. And hilarious, really great personality, wonderful diagnostician. I just really liked that. I didn't particularly want to go into the machining space. I like people more. And so I decided to start on pre-med and started with a scholarship and tested out 5 quarters going in. So I was a 6 quarter freshman. And then in between first and second quarter, I went home for a visit. I broke up with my high school sweetheart and then regretted it. And so I went back to ask her to marry me. Now, this was 9 weeks. And I went to her house and her dad answers the door and I said, hey, it's Bernie here. And he goes, oh, didn't you hear? And my heart just leapt into my throat, right? I thought something happened. And yeah, something did happen. She got married.
Oh, wow.
So I was, heartbroken and went back to school, distraught, didn't know what I wanted to do, wasn't sure medicine was really the direction I wanted to go, felt something deeper inside stirring. And so in that disillusion with life, I suppose, I hit my knees and I prayed. And I said, Father, I want to know what truth is, and I'm willing to die for it if necessary. And it was a really deeply felt commitment. And so that was on Saturday night. The following Tuesday afternoon, here's some Moody's in the background, right? Um, I came back from class, did the, no, I was living in the honors dorm, um, top floor, and came back from class, did the obligatory bong hit and album side meditation, 1975, right? It was 11:11.
Hmm.
And I'm listening to Journey's first album. And in between the vocals and the vamp on the second song, it's called In the Morning Day, wonderful album. I hear this voice, same one I've been talking to since I was a kid, ask me by name. My given name's Bruce. It says, Bruce, are you willing to die for what you believe in? And after I butt puckered, I thought Christ consciousness immediately. And it felt a little empty. I wasn't sure why, didn't question it. I thought, okay, what else? Cosmic consciousness. Yeah, because that's what Christ had, right? And it felt full, just the contemplation of it. So I said yes. And instantly there was a guitar. I mean, talk about timing being impeccable. The guitar riff that Neil Sean does sounds like a rocket ship taking off. And
Hmm.
then I get a tug from my solar plexus and I pop out of body. And I turn to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed, turn back to look where I'm going. And before I can get turned around, I'm engulfed by white light. And it's got this amazing feeling and sensation to it, right? And I'm individuated still, and yet I feel like I'm in a collective, a unitive kind of consciousness, God presence, if you will, right?
Hmm.
And I'm not aware that I'm thinking yet, but I'm analyzing what it feels like. And it's effervescent, iridescent, and high-pitched in sensation. Then I realize I'm thinking. I'm like, oh shit, I'm thinking I can't be dead. Woohoo! Wow, is there more? Was, the impetuous teenager, um, impatience, white light, whatever, right? Um, and then I feel the movement. And I'm in an indigo background with points of light surrounding me. And I know these points of light are points of consciousness intuitively. Whether or not they're in body or not, I'm not sure because I know I'm not. I have the sense that they are somehow. And then the voice picks back up and this, it set my life, right? It says, these are those that you are to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Have faith and trust that everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. And then I feel another rush of energy and I'm back in my body taking a gulp of air, instantly realizing that we are all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. Now, what a rite of passage for an 18-year-old, right? What the hell do you do with that?
Right.
And so what I did find, I started doing a lot of research, and what I found, I was led to the Vedas, English copies of Sanskrit poems that were written 15,000 years ago. And essentially, what they say is that we are all divine threads, incarnate, connected to source, capable of God consciousness. Well, that was almost the same thing, right? And then Jesus taught the same stuff, right? It's just we don't understand it still. Um, so then I started, I told my parents, and they had me see a psychiatrist, and after understandable, right? And so after 3 visits, he says, you're not crazy. You've had a spiritual awakening. That's what he called it. And he said, my advice to you, keep your mouth shut.
Right.
Nobody's going to understand you.
Right.
Now, did I listen?
Especially in 1975.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Rural Indiana is like right.
Right.
So
Right.
um so I didn't really I listened partially, and then the following year when I went back to school, I had the wild idea to buy I wanted to buy a couple sets of drums, put in my room because that was one of my dreams. I want to be a drummer. Right. I played drums all through or through junior high. Didn't play in the band in high school because sports and band didn't mix. And I liked both sports a little better at the time. And so I buy 2 sets of drums with my room and board money for half of the year. I have to move out in the middle of winter because of that. Didn't have the balls to tell my parents, and figured out I'd make it on my own. So I found a place that was free to live, didn't have any heat or running water, but it didn't have electricity. So I set up shop there with some baseboard heaters and some comforters that I got from my grandmother. And then one morning I wake up, and I had a car, so I was driving back and forth to school. And then I got run off the road in the middle of winter, slick streets, clipped the telephone pole, so I no longer had the car.
Mm.
And I relied on some rides back and forth, which I got for a little bit. And then on the 10th of January, I wake up, and it's 1977 now. And the first thing I hear from the announcer on WFBQ, which is a rock station out of Indianapolis that I had as my alarm, he says, "Oh yeah, bundle up today. It's 77 below zero wind chill factor." And I was, oh my God, because it was just a nasty situation, and woke up with some ice on my beard even in that place,
Wow.
which I had at the time. It was long-haired hippie kind of thing, and so I ended up hitchhiking into school, and damn near died on the way, and felt my hands and toes starting to tingle and figure out, I'm either going to stand out in the middle of the road, somebody's going to hit me, or they're going to pick me up because I'm not going to survive if I don't. It was whiteout conditions, 5 o'clock in the morning, nobody could see me. So I took the chance. Guy stopped, got into school, went to school that day, among the, very few who actually showed up for classes.
Right.
And then that night, I had no way to get back. I had a friend in the women's dorm on South Campus, and got booted out of there at midnight. Went over to the frat house row, which is across the street. And I'm thinking, okay, I got to find some place to, stay warm. Knock on a frat house door, and it opens up, and there's a guy from my statistics class.
Mm.
I mean, random, right?
Right.
And he and I, we'd smoke pot together. We'd thrown a frisbee together. He was sort of a half long hair, right? But he was living in a frat house with a bunch of jocks. And so he invited me in. We're playing pool, um, drink some Kool-Aid, and then one of the guys, I got to go to the bathroom. One of the guys from the dorm sees me and just goes ballistic. And he's like twice my size. And so he throws me out the side door, eventually beats me up. Campus police come, because the dean of admission had told him anytime that my name came up, he was to be notified. He was a lodge buddy of my father's,
Mm.
right? So they were concerned. I was being looked out for.
Right.
And so I come out of the emergency room, get stitched up, and um, Joe Nomchev's his name. He was in the waiting room waiting on me, and says, and he's obviously pissed, right? It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and he says, father's going to be here in half hour, and blah blah blah. And I'm trying to talk to him, and he's just not going to have it. And So dad shows up and I said, but I'm glad you're here, ready to go home. And he said, no, don't think so. I think you need to stay for a bit. And I'm thinking blow to the head, possible concussion, overnight observation. Yeah, okay. And then two orderlies come and escort me onto the elevator, take me up to the seventh floor. And I'm starting to feel a little like something else is going on here, right? And so the elevator door opens up, a big black guy sitting in a chair gets up, pulls a wad of keys off his belt, and there's one of those doors with the little bitty windows that, have the wires in them. And his first words are, "Ah, I got another one for me, huh?"
Oh, wow.
Psych ward.
Wow.
So my stint there was rather interesting. The doc there was straight out of the DSM-4 at the time, diagnose and treat, right? And so I got labeled a manic depressive paranoid schizophrenic. Same story, just trying to get somebody to listen so I could figure it out
Hmm.
instead of, being told that I'm crazy or whatever and drugged. And so he put me on 2,000 micrograms of Thorazine a day. And I should have been a lump in the corner, and I was up playing in ping pong, beating the male nurses. They couldn't figure me out until, 3 weeks in, I'm having a conversation with a black woman, midnight. I'm reading the Bible, she's reading a book on Wicca, and we get involved in this conversation. It was really wonderful because I'm like, I'm curious, right? And so maybe radically such. And we're talking, and then she all of a sudden says, I feel like you need a blessing. And do you mind if I give you a blessing? And I'm like, sure, anything could help here. I went out, right? And so she goes into her room, gets a vial of oil, comes back, dabs it on her finger, makes a cross on my forehead, and does a little incantation. And then we continue talking. And then the following morning, I have my next shrink appointment, and I tell him what he wants to hear, that I've been doing drugs and blah, 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 and which I really hadn't been
Hmm.
at that point. Year before, but a different story. So anyway, I tell him what he wants to hear, and all of a sudden, miracle cure.
Oh,
And
wow.
3 weeks later, he started weaning me off the Thorazine. 3 weeks later, I was out. Now, the thing that happened, other than putting 50 pounds on, I w would just be so nervous about talking to people, afraid that I was going to get put back in, that I would tremble so much inside that my body would actually tremble. And it was
Mm.
so embarrassing.
Yeah.
And then I finally got over it. I got involved with JCs, started doing some public speaking, had my drums still. So I started playing in a band. And, it just gradually came back. I mean, high school, I was gregarious. I could go anywhere, talk to anybody. I did a trampoline act for 5,000 people in the halftime of a basketball game as part of a circus halftime act.
Mm.
Uh, so, I was pretty much fearless. But now I was experiencing the opposite because of what had happened
Hmm.
initially, right? Why wouldn't you? And so I weathered that storm and got married, um, working as a machinist, meat cutter, and playing in a band. And all three jobs fell through in the same number of days. This was in 1981 after the auto industry had taken a crash. So it trickled down to our local community. And so I walk out on the front porch the following morning, literally threw my hands up to the sun and said, okay, I'm listening. Where do you want me to go?
Right.
And I'll be damned if I didn't hear Phoenix, plain as day. So 3 weeks later, we were packed up and I bought traded a van that we had for a three-quarter Bandura, three-quarter ton Bandura, um, and packed it up and headed to Phoenix.
Wow. Okay. Quick question for you. Amazing experience. I mean, you've had a lot. And you're only in, this is only around what, 20? I don't know how old you were at
I
that
was
time.
23 at that point,
Yeah.
one child and one on the way.
Yeah, and this is what I mean. You had a lot that has happened up until that point of your life. A lot of people had don't. Especially nowadays, kids are just getting out of their video
And I
game
didn't
stage
know
and
any
trying to figure
better.
out what to do in life. No, but
Yeah.
you had so many experiences at this point. I wanted to know this. When you just from an initial reaction, you come out of getting psychiatric treatment and
Yeah.
you're told all these things. Did you know, did, did it make you question any of your experiences that you had prior to that, or did you know this was just something you had to kind of go along with?
I felt like I lied to the doc
Hmm.
because I knew what he wanted to
To
hear,
hear.
and it wasn't what was going on with me. So it
Right.
felt very inauthentic, and yet and I learned later in marketing, you got to consider your audience and talk to them what in how they want to hear,
Hmm.
which is ridiculous. Here again, it's mid 70s, Midwest. Um, Mentality, just especially at that level. I mean, the first psychiatrist is Dr. Abel, right? Godsend. The second one, standard run of the mill,
Hmm.
right? Couldn't think outside his own box.
Right. Right. I mean, it just makes me wonder how many situations were going on back then where people were having spiritual awakenings, or they were having moments. Yes, there are plenty of people who do
I
need
suspect a lot. I mean, this
treatment,
is
but
how many
yeah.
people were changing their names at that time because of their spiritual awakening. And I had
Mhm.
real issues with that at the time.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I just right away I was wondering if it had changed anything inside of you of, you had OBEs as a child, these cloud experiences, you
Yeah,
had.
no, it didn't because you build on your life experience. Again,
Mhm.
you can argue with it. You can't deny it.
Right. Right. So the awakening itself, when you went into this white light, because the way that you explain that experience, it's very similar to a lot of NDEs, right? So a lot of the
Absolutely.
in
Absolutely.
that white space, and even and then you went into the feeling of it, and you could just see I could see you lighting up because the memory of that feeling was re-engulfing your that experience, right?
Yeah, why wouldn't it,
And it's
right?
so different
That's
from this.
indelible.
Right, right. And I wanted to clarify one thing. You said you were in this kind of indigo space, like probably I'm
Yeah.
assuming that you mean colors and things like that. Were there beings or anything around you? Like, was there anything like that, or was it just this
Points of
feel
light.
points of light, and those were the beings that were
Yeah, I knew intuitively those were points of consciousness.
right?
And when if you study ancient literature, and particularly from the Sanskrit and the Hindu and their explanations, I believe it's of Satori, um, where you're in this cosmic field with points of light.
Hmm.
And, and we all, um, as we understand consciousness being light and the condensation of it, in the right, it's like the ocean, right? The drop is the ocean.
Hmm. Right.
It's just seems to be separate from it.
Hmm.
We're the same. Why and quantum physics is now demonstrating that we're all part of the field,
Right.
right? And we're all energy, not necessarily matter. I made the mistake that had a conversation with Dr. Irvin Laszlo, who's known as the grandfather of quantum systems thinking. He was 90 at the time. He's written, I don't know, 65 books and nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. Um, Yeah, I was talking with him and I said, well, it's been proven with quantum physics that we're 99% space and 1% material. And he says, I would say we're 100% energy.
Right. Hmm.
Can't argue with that.
No, you can't. I've always had this. I'm a visual person, so I always have this visual when people are talking about the physical and non-physical space of who we are, right?
Hmm.
So many have
Well,
said,
I think being a musician kind of gives you the leg up.
yeah, and at 11 years old, I was already tuning into some things that I didn't now I'm now coming to understand were not uh, as
Well,
physical
music
or
has such a
yeah.
music is the door. It's the language of the soul. right?
Yeah.
You emote it, you feel it, you sense it. There's no words that can
Mm,
give you the experience that music can.
right. Yeah, and it helps people heal in so many ways. But I
Yeah,
always have this visual of if I were able to just take just a washboard and wipe the physical away, like physicality, just wipe it away. I think what you'd be left with are points of light, all connecting, kind of like a, right?
it's a
Because we're
great,
all points of light.
absolutely. I call it the thoughtmosphere, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of the. I've traveled many circles, right? In the metaphysical circle, they talk about the firing the grid, right? And there's this grid around the earth that everybody's part of. And I would say even on the earth, we're so interconnected galactically
Hmm.
that we don't have the understanding yet to realize it, let alone behave like we are,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? We're still believing we're separate from things.
You were told at one point you would be part of this, or in your lifetime you would see the
New World Order.
New World Order or
And
this
that to me, at that
shift.
time, I had the net understanding, if you will, of harmony among people and planet. Because that is a true New World Order. It's not
Hmm.
the facade of command and control and all that kind of stuff, which
Right.
probably would have to happen because we're all, building the network for a planetary civilization. You got to have the nodes for distribution, right? The systems in
Mhm.
place to everybody for them to get their needs met. Well, those systems have been awry and they've only served a few. This part of our evolutionary process and cosmologically, we've been foretold that this unveiling or the apocalypse, right, which means uncovering hidden knowledge. It doesn't mean the end of the earth, right? I
Right.
always use it that 99% of the people you ask, what's apocalypse mean? Ah, it's the end of the earth. No, it's not.
It's the end of the earth for some. It's the
Well,
end
yeah,
of the end
I
of the
mean,
rain. Yeah, like
yeah,
end. Yeah, yeah. No, I've heard that before.
the end of the world as we know it,
That's
right?
right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that you've seen in your lifetime up to this point that you've seen this unraveling? Because I mean,
Oh,
in my,
absolutely. I started
yeah.
in 1990. I worked for an aerospace company in the 80s as my corporate job. I was responsible for $7 million a month in shipments and 800 part numbers for commercial spares. I did so well on that. They put me on military spares to reduce the 28% delinquency rate that we had and and hopefully gain the $1 million a month progress payment that the DoD had taken away because we were so far behind.
Mm,
So I fixed that in less than a year, and then got a consultant to have interpersonal skills classes, and they didn't like that. I ended up getting demoted, divorced. My wife started having affairs. It was just a mess. And so afterwards, we got divorced in 88. 1990, I got the opportunity to do a public access TV show. It was sponsored by the Christown Lions Club. And in that, it's called One World at the time. And I interviewed people across all walks of life from, prominent actors like Kai D. He was the original Wofat on Hawaii Five-O, to a woman that went through a homeless transitional facility and got back up on her feet, to a city council person for the city of Phoenix. Um,
mm,
those kinds of things and or people. And I asked them same questions, who are you? How'd you get where you're at? What prompted you to do what you're doing from both inner and outer perspectives? What fears did you encounter? How'd you overcome them? And what's life been like for you as a result? And how do you see a global village evolving? 120 shows. Um, that gave me some real depth of understanding where people were at the time. And even then, there was this underlying layer of conversation that wasn't available publicly, right?
right.
People just didn't talk about that kind of stuff openly, and still don't
Mm,
today.
hmm.
However, in this 35 years, there's been a shift. Right? People have learned how to articulate things. They've become better educated about the difference between the inner and outer worlds. And the outer world, for most of them, is seen as somewhat of an illusion. However, it isn't because we have choice in how we manage it and the things that we co-create as a result of where we put our attention, intention, and interaction. Like we are, like the Vedas say, we have God consciousness. We are creators. We are co-creators. We don't
Mhm.
recognize that power because we've been taught we don't have it, and we've got to follow the rank and file, go to school, get the grades, have the tests, fit into the norming, right? And why? Right?
Yeah. And
You
those were
know,
the
that
questions
just
I was
creates a bunch of
asking.
robots.
Yeah, I was asking that question as a teenager. I remember watching people and thinking, what are they doing? What's the point? What's the
Right.
point of that? And then I remember I had this job early in my late teens, early 20s working for it was kind of like a banking call center type thing. And I just loved talking to people. So I enjoyed that aspect of the job, but the job itself was terrible. And
Yeah.
I remember at one moment I kind of looked around and seen all my peers, all my coworkers, and I thought, oh, these poor people. What are they doing? This whole process is strange. This whole like what are they going after? And I kept asking these questions. I was like, what is this? And then I went, wait, I'm in this. Like I'm in the and it I've had these moments throughout my life at different
Inextricably, you're
times.
in it.
Right?
Right.
Because I go, oh, I'm observing my surroundings, but then realizing I'm part of that. I'm an actor in the scene. And then those were big moments in my life where I said, oh, I'm done. I made like, okay, I'm not going to work here anymore. I literally quit that day. Like it was like, okay, just walked right out. My boss wouldn't let me quit. They put me on like a mental sick leave. They thought I'd lost my mind. I just had my first kid. And they're
Yeah.
like, you can't do that. Like you're going to just take a minute. And I did. I took my minute, but then I started a company and I was like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. But those were moments that I don't know if that was just
Epiphanies,
deep within
ahas,
me.
we call them all kinds of stuff, right? It's
Right,
that
right.
moment of clarity. It's like,
Hmm.
I'm done with this.
Yeah. But fortunately, some people have those moments, but some people they don't seem to have those clear moments and they go
Oh, I
through
think they
life.
do. I
Yeah.
think they do. They're just scared shitless to change,
Mm, that's a good point. That's a good
right? They're
point.
too comfortable,
Right. Yeah.
too secure, feeling too safe, right? And there was a period of my life, that it's like job just over broke, right? You're not secure because Arizona, it's a right to work state. They can fire you at a moment's notice without any provocation whatsoever.
Mm,
So there's this, you know, underlying fear of loss of security that most people have and don't go beyond that because fear is a huge motivating factor, even though it is false evidence appearing real because it's all made up shit in your head.
right. That's true.
It is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so why don't you make other stuff
Mm,
up in your head that's better for you?
right.
And then experiment, try it, see what happens, like you did, right? It's like,
Right.
I'm done, I'm out of here. And what happened? That door closed, you closed that door.
Hmm.
And I would venture to say almost immediately another one opened up.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's not random. That's
Hmm.
process.
Hmm.
That's repeatable. I can tell you how many times I've repeated it, right? Going through
Right.
life. I've had like
Right.
13 different careers, aerospace, education, construction, theater, music. Um, I, it just, it's amazing,
When you were doing the
right?
show, it seems you're almost doing what I'm doing and speaking with people and like as a host.
Absolutely.
That was that first your first introduction to because I know you do a podcast now. That would
Yeah.
have been kind of like the podcast back then, right? Like that was it. Like you're doing interviews, you're sitting and talking with people, having these deep conversations. I don't know how deep you went into the spiritual or any of that kind of stuff with these individuals, but
It
these
depends on the individual, right?
right.
On whether they were willing to go there. I was very sensitive. I did it individual um, conversations for a while, and then I started bringing two people together because what I wanted to do is see if I could find out if they're saying the same things differently,
Hmm.
right? Looking for the consistency, the golden threads,
Right.
throughout
Right.
everything, because that's really what you look for that provides the consistency, um, the evidence,
Hmm.
right? When you start seeing things that are consistent, even if you're observing as an observer slash participant, right, like you were experiencing, there's still consistency that you can
Right.
begin to rely on
Hmm.
because you've proven it works.
Hmm.
Then
I
you
mean,
just have to acquiesce to the process and like, oh shit, here we go again, right?
I love the idea of that. I've thrown around the idea just with how many people I've spoke with that have near-death experiences to have kind of a panel type. I mean, I know Ions does these types of things, but even
Yeah,
in a podcast type format where we go back and forth, because I'm doing the same thing just with each person, but I'm seeing there are differences amongst people's experiences and stories, but there are definite similarities that I
sure.
see and sense.
What do you find to be the key consistency, however they express it, right?
Yeah,
Because language is different.
yeah, the language is all different, but the key is that this is just what I've come to conclude is that we have, I'm going to use different words here, but we are we have kind of an oversoul or some type of I always use the hand as this is us, and we're having these experiences, which are these
Right.
extensions of who we are. That's one aspect of it. The thing I'm still trying to understand is how time works, because obviously time isn't, I could be here and here at the same time and be having these multiple dimensional experiences all at the same
Absolutely,
time.
which we don't quite understand yet. There's a
Right.
couple of interesting,
Hmm.
one's experiential and one's proof, paper proof, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, the experience is called the multi-plane awareness technique. It was developed by William Swigart in the 1950s. And it's a facilitated process that takes the participant through nine planes of consciousness. You develop your light body, you extend it above you, project your consciousness in it, and then you go through the planes. And it's led by the facilitator. Um, then I went through it, got to the end, and they take you beyond it to show you there's more, and then are supposed to bring you back through and drop the bodies off on the planes that you picked them up on.
Hmm.
Well, I got to the end and I hear the prompt, I want you to get ready to come back. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And so I come back and I open my eyes up, turn to look at the facilitator. And first thing he says is, uh-oh. I'm like, what? He said, I gave you the prompt to get ready to come back. You weren't supposed to come back yet.
Oh,
To drop the bodies off where you got them.
right.
And I'm flippant, right? I'm 31, 32 at the time. It's like, ah, oh well, it is what it is, right? So then I started having that night, actually, 2 o'clock in the morning, roughly, I was awakened, startled, awakened by this noise in my room. And I gradually, over the next few weeks, I mean, it was all kinds of mixed things, voices, tones, music, static, all kinds of stuff. And then it gradually dissipated. I wasn't starkly awakened. I started to get used to it, but it happened every night for the next 2 weeks until I had a psychic friend of mine spend the night. We'd been working on a project together. She left her day timer, called me from her house, wanted to come back and get it at 11:30 at night. And I'm thinking, okay, possible. Maybe I can talk her and spend the night. She didn't know a thing about what was going on, and just pick up, see what she gets, right? So she stays. At the appointed time, she sits straight up in bed and says, oh my God, how do you sleep in here? There's got to be at least a dozen different beings in this room.
Wow.
And at that point, I was like, shit, that's me. Why didn't I get that? Right?
Mm,
Um, so then fast forward to 2018, that was in 1989. 2018, I get the opportunity to be interviewed by Jeffrey Mishlove.
mm,
28-year dream come true.
mm,
I wanted to emulate him and Bill Moyers on my original show, hoping someday to get to be worthy of an interview with one of them. So 2018 rolls around, amazing serendipitous thing, and I'm preparing to go up to Albuquerque to do some interviews with him. And I'm looking through his videos and I find one with Vernon Neppy, and he's talking about the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm. And
Wow.
he explains it as being, I did a little bit more research because it was like, wow, okay. Basically, they posit it was a theory of everything paper that he and Edward Close submitted in peer reviewed, came out in ResearchGate in 2010, I think. And what they say is that, or posit, is that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions. Ding, 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 right?
Hmm.
That's what's available for the human bandwidth experience. That doesn't eliminate more, just like the multiplane experience, right?
Right.
It just says that this is our bandwidth. So thinking about that, bodies on each plane, what are they doing? What are they responsible for? How do we integrate, align, and become that whole cosmic consciousness condensed into form and activate that perfected form, fit, and function that we have in the world by design? Because
Mm.
we all have a design
Right.
that we
Yeah.
just haven't been able to acquiesce to because we're still too mismanaged by worldly affairs.
Hmm. I haven't heard this nine-dimensional uh idea before. I'm wondering how they came to conclude the nine. And I what's fascinating to
Lots of
me.
math, lots of postulating, probably some direct experience,
Hmm. You probably even through I sometimes wonder through meditation what comes out through because some people use even meditation and different. I'll even go there and say ayahuasca, different forms of ways people can kind of reach a different form of who
Yeah,
we are.
psychedelics were my favorites in college, and
Yeah,
that helped a
right.
lot. It took me into worlds that few understood, let alone even knew about.
Hmm. And that's a whole other area. But I was going to say to you, because you asked me earlier the things that I've seen that, what I've concluded as similarities and things like that. And
Yeah.
what's fascinating to me is a lot of people have these experiences. They have like, the classical, oh, I've come above my body. I've gone to the corner of the room and I look at the body and say, ooh, what is that? I don't want anything to do with that anymore. That's very common. They're not attached to it anymore. Then they see the light. They go through the light. Some of them go through a tunnel. That some of them see loved ones and these different energy bodies that they were accustomed to in their life form that they had
Oh,
had so that
based
they
on what
feel
their
more.
beliefs are going into it.
Yeah. What the ones that fascinate me though, the ones and those are all fascinating and I'll love to keep talking to people about those because it keeps uncovering more and more. But I've had a
Sure.
few which were really
Well, and it covers
fascinating.
things. It's cathartic for them.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, because it opens up. I've even had people like sharing their experience and during the interview, there's this other part that I totally forgot
Yeah,
it
yeah,
because
yeah. The aha
it
moment, right?
realigns those moments.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like, you have a counselor, right? It doesn't matter what the counselor says. It's the questions they ask and your response that you're listening to that allows you to not have the critical self, to have the examining self show up, listen to how you're thinking, talking, right? And you have that third party, right?
Right.
View,
Yeah.
the observer then is able to witness that and process even more,
Right.
offer insights and things. Oh, I didn't think about that before, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Layer upon layer.
I've had two in particular moments in the interviewing that I've done that really made me try to question things a little more. And one was someone who had an NDE and she was in her light body, but would be able to travel to other beings that were on other planets and other dimensional situations that were actually, in fact, her. So they were experiencing multiple lives in different spaces and they were able to witness, oh, I'm over here doing this. But I'm also over here doing this and I'm over here doing this. That's one fascination that I had that I was like,
And I
wow.
would say that gives credence to that multidimensional, that multi-plane experience because it's all different vibrational frequent
Hmm.
ranges.
Yeah. And I also had one who had went from this life, passed, and was someone else, was in another, again, another life form, different. It wasn't necessarily human, but kind of, it was almost like they went to sleep here, woke up this other space, and they were like, oh, this is who I am. And then, and then, somehow came back. I forget the whole process, but came back to
Sure.
their regular body.
Yeah.
But the idea was that, again, that they were experiencing life in another, they had almost like jumped to another life
Sure.
because
For
this life had ended
temporarily.
briefly
Yeah.
and then they came back. That one really threw me too. And wow, that's
Yeah,
like,
there's talk in ufology of what they call walk-ins,
mm,
right? Where somebody's decided, okay, I'm out of here. And then there's a soul exchange. Not quite so sure about that. Again, I think it might be layers of release in order to acquiesce to the fuller being. Because I was even told that I had a walk-in that occurred when I was 6 years, 2 months, 19 days, 11:43 a.m. It was that specific. Um, I don't remember anything. That was the time that I was, um, I suppose, getting most familiar with the voice when I was at that age.
mhm.
Initially, I developed conversations,
Yeah.
uh, but we're one. Essentially, in my opinion and my experience so far, we're one point of reference. And that point of reference does have ripples, right? Or
Mhm.
trails, if you will, if back into the psychedelics, that there's that one aspect of self that is all knowing about the specificity of your particular frequency,
Mm.
right? It's back to that beta thing, you connected to source. Well, how is that done? Well, we each have a specific frequency that we vibrate at. Well, that frequency has a data pool that's available
Right.
based on the questions that we ask and the awareness that we have that allows us to continue that radical curiosity and finding out who the heck we are and what we're here to do.
Right. Yeah. How did Planetary Citizens come to be? What is Planetary Citizens and when did that start to
Beautiful
form?
process. So, having that conversation, I had thoughts of, okay, well, what's that going to mean that maybe I'm going to be a planetary administrator at some point because I understand how to get all the systems to work together. And so I thought, oh, how's this going to happen? And then as I read a lot, Ascended Masters, Guy Ballard's works, 13 volumes, I think, Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, the other authors and just amazing things to try and get as much understanding from different perspectives as I could, and then be able to apply that. Well, in that process, I became aware of the early organization called Planetary Citizens that Donald Keyes founded in the 1970s. He was the speechwriter for Youthful, who was the executive director of the UN at the time.
Mm,
So he was involved in this world. I've got his book. He actually had two, but so he was talking about, and the group essentially, Norman Cousins was part of it. They were thinking outside the box completely, no boundaries. We're on a planet together, right? These national bound borders and things like that are all illusory, fictitious, all self-created. But in reality, we're all planetary citizens. I mean, think about it. Every cell of our body, of the what we think is material, comes from ingesting things from Mother Earth, right?
right.
So we are inextricably connected at that quantum level,
Hmm.
right? So then how do we go beyond that? Well, they had some ideas to begin with, and of course, in the 70s and early 80s, those kinds of ideas didn't fly very far.
Hmm.
And yet they were in those positions to even proffer them, right? So then in 20 or 2009, I started thinking about it even more. 2010, I got tapped on the shoulder to look up Planetary Citizens to see if the domain was even available. And
Right.
I'm like, certainly it's not going to be available. Well, .com and .org weren't, but .net was. And so I snagged it. And then I built a website featuring world servers at the time. So it allowed me to do a little more research, find out who's the big players are, and then showcase them for a time. And fortunately, I had web skills and things to do so. And then and so it just sat for a while. Did some other things. And then in 2021, when my wife encouraged me to start One World in the New World, then it began moving towards that direction again, thinking, okay, now how can I take what I'm doing and expand it into something more practical? And what came was another tap on the shoulder in August of 23, and that was to submit nonprofit application papers to the IRS. So here we're taking the jump to actually make it official,
Oh, wow.
right?
Yeah.
Up to that point, it was just an idea.
Hmm.
And then in December, we got the letter back, approval. And so 2024, I spent redesigning the website. And what occurred to me, excuse me, was that one of the best models to use as far as elevating consciousness, um, Dawkins had a good one with the scale. However, spiral dynamics seem to fit the evolutionary process of civilizations, right?
Hmm.
And how we could at least look at the levels that we're ascending to, where we're at, the different um, layers in that.
Hmm.
And then specifically, what came out of that through Barbara Marx Hubbard's work was the co-creation wheel. And the co-creation wheel then breaks down society into 12 sectors. And all of those sectors, kind of like we were talking about distribution systems, right?
Hmm.
That they're all different elements of society that have to be in place in order for society to work. And those have been siloed because they're not talking to each other.
Mm.
Otherwise, we'd have better system. We'd have a holistic system in place, and we don't. Um, so what our objective is to take each one of those sectors, first of all, to take One World, a New World, and then take it to the next level of panel discussions with people in those sectors that are doing the trench work and have ideas about how they fit in with other sectors that haven't necessarily been um, presented yet.
Right. Okay.
Right, because I know these people are there. I know they're working on things. I know that there's a huge leap in the activity after COVID because it gave people a chance to sequestrate, find, and self-examine. Who am I? What am I here to do? What do I believe in? What am I willing to do about it? And what am I
Right.
willing to risk in order
Right.
to activate myself to do so?
Hmm.
So a lot of people, groups, virtual groups began forming, and then all people have to do is just look, right? It's all observable. It's there. So then what do? We figure out how to at least begin to nurture conversations that mitigate the silos and begin to have, okay, conversations about what can we do individually, the whole think global, act local thing. Only really have a better discussions about that, what individuals can do, what groups can do, what we can do as a planetary civilization, what educational processes. Part of what we're doing right now with each newsletter that we send out is we take one of those sectors and we break it down into what an individual can do, what groups can do, and so on and so forth, right? And kind of imbue that with a whole nother layer of educational material to support it.
Hmm.
And so ultimately, um, maybe 15 years from now, 12, 15 years, according to the Mayan calendar, that's when the window closes. It opened in 87. It closes in 2035. This is the segue between ages, between the Piscean and the Aquarian age. There's a
Okay.
50-year liminal space, if
Right.
you will,
Right.
right, where we adjust, maybe,
Hopefully.
hopefully, right?
Yeah, hopefully, for sure.
So in
Yeah.
that space, then there's still time because, as you said, depending on where you focus your attention, intention, and interaction, time's malleable.
Hmm.
And when others are doing similar things, looking for resonance, harmony, if you will, then when you reduce things, just like what is the second law of thermodynamics that the systems fall into entropy, right? No, they don't. The man-made systems do. If you look at universe systems, they further refine themselves into natural order.
Mm.
Again, the design, right? We have no clue how we were designed. We still think Lucifer is part of the devil, right? Well, if you think about things, and most high angel of light and sound, light and music, I think it is, um, in the council of non-corporeal beings, right? And you're trying to figure out how to condense into form to experience what you've created. Who are you going to pick? Right? Hey, Lucy, show us how it's done, right? Figure it
Right.
out.
Right.
And so, angel of light, right? Light bearer, right?
Hmm.
Well, gosh, all the signs are there. We just don't see them from that perspective because we're too caught up in the patriarch
Mm.
of, how, we diminish women, woman made from man's rib. That's a immediate subjugation of the feminine energy.
Hmm.
It's bullshit,
Hmm.
right? So, but yet we bought into this for millennia.
That's right. That's right. And the interesting thing about what you're doing, so what I love what you're doing because I was thinking about this the one day. I was looking at, how many Facebook groups I'm part of, people now getting together. There's different groups even locally. And I'm thinking, okay, how is this all going to come together? Because we have pockets of
Right.
groupings of ideologies and things coming together. And I'm thinking, how did I look at not to I don't want to go down the religion world here, but how did they get a hold of everyone? Because it's not that I'm not completely against religion. I'm Catholic myself. I have different belief systems and things, but there was a way to get a hold of the masses. And and
That
and
was
it's
fear initially, right? When the
right.
Bible was canonized,
Mhm.
um, it, Constantinople, um, Emperor Constantine said, "Okay, you're going to believe this, or under threat of death, you're going to
Mhm.
profess, or else."
Right.
Right? And
Right.
so when you get that kind of, it's like, okay, okay,
So
I believe
fear is
you.
the
Right?
underlying
And then that
drive.
just trickles through, and
Yeah.
without monitoring or managing it, it just becomes ubiquitous because they acquiesce to what's easiest and they love
Mhm.
to be told what to do. They don't want to think.
Right.
Which brings us to another point of Satan. Do you know where the word Satan comes from?
I
I
don't
had
personally.
questions, and when I was in college, I went to library, university library, right? The two huge A through L and M through Z, right? Volumes. And the very first reference is the Greek thetan, Thetan, meaning thinker.
Oh wow.
So
And
what
we
that
don't want
says,
that.
well, it exactly, and it comes back to the self, right? We
Right.
are our own adversary. We can talk ourselves into something, we can talk ourselves out of something,
Hmm. Right.
or we can simply just shut up and be and allow that which is deeply embedded in us to emerge. Now, today we call that the recursive function. And that term came out of the computer world, right? Where a
Hmm.
system queries itself for problem solving. Well, what do we do? What Jesus teach? Go within. Go into
Hmm.
your closet and pray. Knock, seek, and right. Um, all of that stuff. Well, it's the same thing. And those answers are available. You just got to stop trying to answer questions with what you think you know,
Hmm.
right? That's those 70,000 thoughts a day that get in the way. Well, when you can develop the discipline to manage your thinking and learn how to find that stillness with inquiry, the radical curiosity has to be there. Then those answers will emerge. It might be through another person, it might be through a flippant, errant thought that you have that just kind of comes in because you've made the logic path to get to that leaping place, and then you can cross that bridge,
Yeah.
right? Or it comes through a, TV show, a piece of music. There's all kinds of ways to experience the oracle,
Right.
right?
Right. I've also had the optimism that I always say this, I look at like the shows like Soul Inspired and your podcast, people who are doing these things like media and knowledge is so much more accessible now than it was when you were going through stuff in the
Oh
late
yeah.
70s there. I mean, you wouldn't have had any access to anything to understand even what you were experiencing, right? Into the spiritual awakening you had, even in what was that the
Well,
night?
that's where the unseen hands come in,
Hmm.
right? Where
Right.
you have the intent to know, you're willing to risk it all to
Hmm.
get it, and that's the universe is bound
Hmm.
at that point. It's the law, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
right? You give, like Jesus said, when you give yourself, you'll find yourself.
You obviously have a lot of knowledge, a lot of information the things that you're doing
I don't
is,
know shit.
but the work that you've done and running, this Planetary Citizens, I don't even call this a network. I'm not sure how you
It's a
would.
nonprofit. It's growing into a network. I spent 3.5 years as operations director for a global peace movement called Live and Let Live, which gave me gave me the opportunity to practice my leadership skills. And I've got a couple of master's degrees in business. I've got an MBA and an MA in org management. So I've got both hard and soft skills. This gave me a way to express what I think I know
Hmm.
and figure out what I don't, and help an organization grow as well as my own leadership ability. And so then that just recently changed. They're taking a step back to develop a more robust website, which means we don't have a team of people and I'm not necessary, right? So now it gives me the opportunity to refocus on building planetary citizens and finding. We've got a small group of folks as a board of advisors. We really
Oh,
need the multi-generational engagement because we live in a world of many generations,
right.
and we need to learn how to work together. And it is so important that we do so. Everyone has something to offer,
Hmm.
and to set aside whatever preconceptions, judgments, criticisms, whatever. Doesn't matter, right? We're here
Hmm.
now,
Hmm.
and in order to be here now fully, the past doesn't matter. Period.
Right. Right.
We'd
Yeah.
like to bring it in, right? We carry the baggage. I guarantee you there are even no carry-ons on this flight.
Right.
It's just each of us,
Yeah.
right? Bare naked ladies. No, right. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
all kinds of physical connotations to that. So those kinds of opportunities exist. It's just up to us, first of all, to recognize that they're there and then to help support making them available.
No, I love also that you mentioned different, you know, I don't know if you're talking about ages or you're talking about just because I look at like just running the podcast myself, I can see the analytics of the people who tune into Soul Inspired. And there's a definite push around 50 plus the age group because people start to become more aware of like, whoa,
Right.
what just happened? It's like you wake up at age 50 or 55 or 60 and you go, what did I just do? And now I gotta but then I'm also surprisingly seeing a younger generation that's interested in this content and this kind of information. And for that to
Absolutely.
happen, that's a beautiful thing because that can open up. more impact. It can drive a bigger like bigger amount of people, the more people to
Sure.
actually see this kind of content. I just think it's
Well,
important, and I've been just noticing it more and more in my own analytics, even on the show. So yeah, I just
yeah,
wanted to
mine
mention
are
that. Yeah.
ditto. And thank you for that. It's confirming, corroboratory, right? And um, what's surprising for me, most of my listeners are between 24 and 44, 60, 70% of
Oh.
them. As a coach now, another story, because I've been uh, originally a life coach, transformational coach. I'm now calling it integral because of that connotation using spiral dynamics and that understanding. The Again, across generations, whether it's I forget what the new ones are being called, but whether it's Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers, um, we all have this difference of opinion because of our tenure in life.
Hmm.
And it's looking for, I think, the bonding agent, if you will. Oh, by the way, bonding agent, hydrogen is bonding agent of our DNA. Um, it also powers the sun, the most plentiful gas in the universe. It is potentially the conduit for consciousness because of all the elements, it's only got two, the rest have three. So if you're looking at the pattern, then there's got to be a tertiary piece of that that we're not seeing yet,
Hmm.
in my opinion. There's a
Right.
quantum biologist in New Zealand that figured it out too. He's the first one that I've been able to talk to that, oh yeah, you're right. Right. And I'm like, cool, somebody else. Because I mean, that's just that thinking is so far out there.
Right.
Um, but the being able to and being able to deal with multiple generations, being able to speak to them in how they hear, first of all,
Hmm.
understanding where they're at, how they're listening, being able to nurture that first. It's like Covey says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Well, you're not going to have clear communication until you understand who you're talking to,
Right.
right?
Right.
You
Absolutely.
query. This is something that stark revelations with my relationship with my wife. She was raised in the Soviet culture.
Mm.
She left in 1989 at 20. Um, Far different than American culture.
Right.
And so not only did we have, she spoke fluent English, but we met in 2016 at her Kundalini yoga teacher training
Mm.
graduation. So she's a very high vibe kind of woman already,
Right.
uh, let alone being a piano pedagogue. That coming together has been um, total ends of the spectrum, right? From excruciating to ecstatic because of the ability or inability to actually hear what each other was saying because we're listening from ultimately this cultural
Hmm.
aspect and programming from that
Right.
rather than being in the faith, love, and trust place and not be defensive,
Hmm.
right? Because if we're misunderstood, if we're asking, here's the interesting thing. If you're misunderstood, you feel angst. You feel almost angry because you're
Yes.
not being heard, right?
Right.
And then conversely, how do you express how you're truly feeling so that that meaning comes through?
Hmm.
And how can you listen without all of those filters from a place of unconditional love,
Hmm. Yeah.
without boundaries, right? And so this requires a great deal of trust in yourself and trust in the other,
Hmm.
which is what happens when you're deeply in love, to the point of, I'll even bring up the term twin flames.
Hmm.
I wondered about that. I've spent a lot of time in the metaphysical world in the 90s. wondered about the possibility of it. And then finally got angry with the guys upstairs. And I said, hey, look, I'm done. I need my partner. Bring her.
Hmm.
I'm bailing, right? Well,
Right.
sure enough, a series of dreams and visions and on both our parts brought us together at her graduation. It was a divine conspiracy.
Hmm.
And recognizing that, having that partnership for me, especially with, my life themed with harmony among people and planet, what's a better partner than one that's supposed to be our arch enemy,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Well, you learn from each other. The other,
Absolutely.
and the other thing, I find that a lot of people have different ideas about the twin flame thing, but I can tell you, I mean, probably the audience can agree with this too. I'm sure you can look at, I don't know what partners people currently have and things like that, but there is definitely a difference. Like when you meet that person or you have that person, you go, wow, this is a completely different connection. And
And
I
they
know
will
we're all,
challenge you to be your true self,
mhm,
right? You got to peel back the layers of the onion to get there. And that can
right,
be excruciating, which is why twin flames sometimes don't work. And
right.
there's this connotation of one's going to be a runner, right?
Yeah, right, right. Absolutely. Usually that's the case. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. All this has been fascinating. Just the hearing everything. You've also written 40 books. Like, is this all on your website? Like, where do people find you? Is it on, is your main website, is that the website, the global, or sorry, the Planetary Citizens? Is that where people find information on
No,
you
I
or?
have a digital vitae at zenbenefiel.com. My coaching site is BeTheDream.com. I've had that business name since 1988.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah,
like that.
I was in the aerospace industry when I got tapped on the shoulder to do that, thinking that I wanted to bring spiritual and best practices in the spiritual and business together
Hmm.
was my goal. Um, then planetarycitizens.net. That would provide pretty much everything. I've also got some books up on zenbenefiel-author.com. I mean, I got so much stuff, I don't know what to do with it sometimes.
Yeah, so you have it everywhere. So I'm sure too, if people Google your name, you'll find all your books and things like that and
Oh, yeah.
writings you've had.
Yep.
I ask everybody this at the end of each show, and I'm really interested to get your input on this. So you haven't had an NDE, but you've had a lot of experiences. You've had different experiences, and I'm sure you're aware of what's going on. I always ask everyone, if you look at what we're doing, here we are every day. We wake up, we eat, we do our thing. We're trying to impact all these things we're doing in our life. But for those who are aware of the other side, they come back a lot of times and they're pretty upset about it, if I'm being honest. A lot of them are like, what am I doing back here? Because they've seen the beauty, they've seen this other side, who we truly
Yeah,
are.
they're still stuck in their ego. There's no ego without we go.
Right. I like that. Why why would we come here and do this? Why would we come out and have this act? Like, what is the purpose of our existence in this physical if the
First
other
of all,
side
think
is such a
about it.
beautiful place?
To learn this is even what all the spiritual masters teach, right? Is to love and be loved. That's the ultimate unconditional design space that we can be in. Now, as an evolutionary process, we have to learn to get along with ourself, self-love, right? Law of one says service to self, service to others, right? Those are the two choices. Well, no, there's a third choice there. And service to self is service to others,
Mhm. Right.
right?
Yes.
We're not islands.
Mhm.
We are here as community. We're on one planet, one air, one water. Yeah, we got different skin colors, different ideology. We're still all, of the same carbon-based life forms. That's back to the number in the Bible, right? The triple six. Six protons, six electrons, six neutrons. Carbon atom. Truly, the number of man. That's knowledge and wisdom. which is what it says it has to be interpreted by, right? Which is science, right? So there's no other connection. That's the simplest Occam's razor, right? Given everything, what's the simplest explanation? Well, what brings us together? We're carbon-based. We know that. So those kinds of things bring us together more. There is no separation there at that core level. And again, back to hydrogen being the conduit of consciousness. Hydrogen's the DNA bonding agent in every one of us. So it's all the same energy, right?
Mm,
Different to the frequency that we carry specifically, but it's all same source.
right, right.
So as we're learning the quantum field and living in it more, and the references from both science, mostly science now, because it's referencing, corroborating what we've known from the spiritual texts for thousands of years. It's just putting a different way of speaking about it that seems to be more understandable
Hmm. Yeah,
today
right,
because of our scientific prowess.
right. Yeah. No, I love that. And
Fascinating.
I love also what you just said. Something else I'll take from this. I always say when I ask that question, I get a little bit from someone and then I think I've figured it all out. And then I get more from the next person. It's like I just continue to learn, right? And that's the
I
beautiful
have
thing.
never figured it all. You don't know
Yeah,
what you don't know. You
right.
do know what you do know,
Hmm.
and you build upon that, even putting it on the chopping block.
Yeah, yeah. But I like you mentioned service to self is service to others, right?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of confusion around that out there. That if you do something good for to yourself, you're a bad person or
Somehow
you're
hedonistic.
right, right. And I know this from when I went when my one of the first things I wanted to do once I started kind of figuring who I was getting to social work, and I wanted to go and I wanted to work with uh you know and help everybody and heal them all and fix them all. And in doing that, when I was doing it, the reason I don't work in that now is, I mean, I work with others, whether it's coaching and music or spiritual coaching, things like that. But it's
Right.
when I was doing that, first of all, I was in a lower vibration. It was a very low vibration, some of the work I was doing, just the energy around it. And I was pushing so much of my own energy out without actually taking care of myself that I just
Hmm.
broke down. Like I just couldn't handle it. It just was too much. And I remember thinking, well, if I'm supposed to be this great human being in this world and this is what I'm supposed to do, why does this feel so terrible? And why, I could tell by the way I was being that this would lead to illness. I could just tell my body wouldn't have been
Sure.
able to handle it.
Well,
And
the
I had to get out of that.
dis-ease, right?
Yeah, I couldn't do it. And I thought, well, this is confusing. So I'm not supposed to be doing my music because that's egotistical. I'm not supposed to do anything like so there's a lot of confusion that happens with a lot of people. But the truth is that if you love yourself, if you self-serve, if you do the things that actually have meaning and fullness in yourself, you're going to reflect that on everybody. And that
Absolutely.
and that's where the power is, right? Like that is where you reach people. And so that's something I'm just I've discovered now, but it's like I'm in the infancy of it, because I went through all that chaos of
I
thinking,
still am too.
right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, it's
I
incredible.
don't think that ever. It's like, again, I'm going to reference Christ and it be ye as little children,
Mhm.
right? That constant innocent naivety, curiosity, those three things are important. You need to be free enough to where you can adapt and shift when and where necessary,
Mhm.
instantly. And when you're not attached, that recursive function again, right? You go inside, you dissolve into self, into that unconditional, loving nothingness, right? From which everything comes.
Mhm.
And when you release yourself, you go into that unqualified absolute, if you will, and emerge with a new level of surety in your service.
Mhm.
because you'll combine your own design with whatever's in front of you to serve.
Mm.
That's kind of a project management philosophy, if you will,
Yeah.
per
Wow.
day. Okay?
I love that though. Like I've loved having this conversations and I could speak with you for a long time.
Yeah, we have been speaking a long time.
And we have been.
Currently
I've
speaking, I
taken a
think
lot of your
from
time. So I really
yeah,
appreciate you coming on and sharing your information and just your knowledge with it. I know you said, well, it's whatever it is, but it is life knowledge. And so I appreciate you coming on Soul Inspired. And I always talk to the audience and say I encourage them to please like, share, and subscribe to Soul Inspired. If this episode spoke to you, or you
absolutely.
know that it would speak to someone, please share it with them because that's what we're doing. We're just trying to
And
continue to share. But I really do appreciate you coming on and speaking with
oh,
us
you're
today.
very welcome. I would like to share one last thing, if I
Absolutely.
may. Um, my 43rd book, Planetary Citizens Awakening the Heart of Humanity. It's getting some great reviews on Amazon. It is a free download at planetarycitizens.net as well.
Beautiful. I'll put that link in the description. And when was that released? That's a recent release.
March 27th of
Oh, it's
2025.
brand new. It's brand
It's
new.
brand new.
Wow. Well, I'm sure we everybody will appreciate that if you can go on there. So that's at the which website is that again?
Planetarycitizens.net.
Perfect.
It'll be a pop-up that
Great.
takes a couple of minutes.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate that. I will make sure to share that. But again, thanks for coming on Soul Inspire. Really appreciate it, Zen.
Oh, you're welcome, Joe. Thanks for having me.
So